Tonight's topic, was Jesus married? Well, I think probably before we dive deeper into this, Bishop Peterson, I guess I want to ask, is this an important question for Gnostics?
I think that it can be, but I think that we need to, let's have a little bit of background here. This has become a trending topic online and other places because recently a very small fragment, the size of a credit card, a papyrus that was discovered, was validated as not being a forgery. This particular piece of parchment has been dubbed the Gospel of Jesus' Wife by Professor Karen King from Harvard Divinity School. And she announced the existence of this fragment back in 2012, and the fragment mentions that it has Jesus referring to his wife. And this caused a great deal of consternation, with many people declaring that it was a forgery. Now a team has said, no, this is not a forgery. It is ancient. And that, now the question is, what does this mean for anybody, much less Gnostics? And I would answer this in a couple of different ways. I'd say, first of all, the existence of this, the existence of a very old fragment of text does not prove that Jesus was married, the historical Jesus was married. All right? It doesn't tell us a whole lot about, it doesn't, offer much of a theology other than to say that Jesus did indicate in the papyrus that woman could be his disciple. And for Gnostics who are not so interested in literal scriptures anyways, this may not, again, I don't know what the impact is supposed to be unless you're very, very concerned about the idea of Jesus being celibate and being unmarried. If that's an attachment that you have, by all means, this could be an issue, but only in that it proves that some early Christians had this story and discussed the idea of Jesus being being married and having ideally a sex life.
Well, it seems that this question at least appears on the surface from everything I'm seeing all over the internet, seems to be of much more interest in the mainstream Christian circles than it does in the Gnostic circles. I mean, most of the Gnostics I talk to, this is really a non-issue.
Yeah, I think a lot of us aren't interested. I mean, unless a person was, again, really attached to the idea of Jesus being celibate. Although, interestingly enough, Professor April DeConnick, who is an expert in the Gnostic scriptures, has suggested back in 2012 that if this is a genuine parchment, that it may be connected to a Valentinian school. Because of a possible similarity with the Gospel of Philip, but also the Gospel of Thomas, which is dubiously Gnostic. So, there may be that little bit of a connection there. But again, it shows that it proves that people had a story that they were telling. It doesn't prove much else as far as I'm concerned.
No, and you stated, I mean, right now we've got a small little fragment about the size of a credit card that now after 2 years and much debate has been proven not to be a forgery, but an authentic text. I'm always excited when there's new texts that are found. I mean, regardless of the message that's in there, I'm very excited that these are found. And to see even a sample of what one particular group, even if it was just one group, of what their particular thoughts and interpretation of the whole entire, Christian mythos was, or their Gnostic myths, or any of it that pertains either to history or to religion at that time. I'm excited about that. What I guess I find a little mind-boggling is all of the various threads and things we do see on social media and the internet on this. Many kind of try to, I think, make claim that there is no mention of Jesus being married in the New Testament, and I think we would agree on that. And as such, there is no claim in the New Testament whether he was married or not. So we can't decisively, from the New Testament Gospels, make the determination was he married or not. Some make various implications from statements in both Second Peter and also from some of the writings of Paul. But then I've also seen kind of the other end of the spectrum, that maybe that this was intentional omissions, that during the Council of Nicaea and when they were selecting text and books, that they possibly did omit any text that would have pointed to the idea of Christ being married. Your thoughts on any of this?
I was raised Protestant, so I really don't have much of a dog in this fight. Celibacy was never held up as an ideal. I believed in the virgin birth, never believed that Mary remained a virgin. So a lot of this is, the idea of Jesus potentially having a wife and a sex life just isn't all that scandalous to me. Yeah, you're right. The text doesn't say one way or the other whether he was married. Now, one thing that I've always heard is that Jews generally have an obligation to marry. And so it would seem very strange that Jesus or even Paul, for that matter, did not at one point in their lives have a wife. One person has come out and suggested maybe Jesus was a widower, who had not yet remarried. We just don't have this information, and I find it peculiar that people can get so offended by this strictly because the canonical Gospels don't address the issue. It's just not addressed. Why get upset about a papyrus being found that says that some early Christians had this story? And I think for me, I guess my interest here is, okay, so what does this say about the way many modern Christians approach their faith? And I did something that I should not do, and that is I went and read the comments on various stories, all over the web, and it was shocking to see both it was Catholics and evangelicals just getting extremely upset about this. And evangelicals are all about the family. And I just found it astounding that they found this offensive, I guess largely because, as far as I can tell, either because the canonical Gospels never mentioned this, or perhaps that people are giving credence to non-canonical Gospels. And that may be part of the reaction here. But I think that if people are willing to be honest with themselves, this can offer people an opportunity to reflect on their own reaction to this. If they have a strong reaction to the idea of Jesus being married, okay, let's work with this a little bit. Why don't we sit with that, meditate on it, and say, okay, do I have an issue with this for a reason? Am I happy about this? Why? Is it validating certain lifestyle choices that I've made? If this is making me uncomfortable, why? Is the idea of Jesus having relations with a woman that disturbing to me? What's going on there? I think it's an area potentially for spiritual growth for people. But again, I think that all we have here is evidence of a story. That's it.
True. And I think we could sit and have a much longer debate than we either would have here on Talk Gnosis tonight, or even in our podcast and Talk Gnosis After Dark later. I mean, we could continue the discussion for a long time. But what I would have people kind of think about is a few things. Gnostically, I think probably the only reference that we can probably think of is that in the Gospel of Philip, where, to kind of paraphrase one of the particular lines, is that the disciple that he loved more than the others, he kissed frequently upon the mouth. Most would make the assumption that that would be Mary Magdalene. I would also tell my non-Gnostic brethren to kind of look at the symbolism of marriage that we see throughout the Bible, particularly in the New Testament. And I would ask them to remember what was the very first miracle that Christ performed.
At the wedding at Cana.
Absolutely, turning water into wine at a wedding. Yeah. And we see lots of references to the bride and the bridegroom, throughout both Gnostic scripture and even within the New Testament.
We absolutely do.
And, so I think the language in itself kind of suggests kind of the importance of this idea of marriage, of the bride and the bridegroom.
Yeah.
Now, whether we want to use that as any form of evidence of Christ himself being a married individual or not, again, that is up for debate. But I think that there is enough evidence to suggest that the symbolism of the bride and the bridegroom plays a very important part of early Christianity, and then Christianity as it evolved throughout the centuries.
Yeah, and getting in that now, I don't want to say I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I understand that some people find the notion of Christ's celibacy, his non-married state, to be very precious, particularly because we have the idea of Christ being married to the church. Christ has a wife. It is the church, and that is who he is. He's the husband of the church. He cares for the church. He's the head of the body. That sort of symbolism, and I understand why that's very important to some people. I also understand that many people, including the early Christians, found a great deal of purpose in a religion that did not mandate marriage. Christianity is distinct in that regard because Judaism and later on, of course, Islam required people to get married. And if you're not married, you haven't fulfilled a certain religious obligation. Christianity is very different. From the very beginning, people had the option of remaining single. And there are some people who are single, who haven't chosen to be single, but there have been issues that have prevented that from happening. So having this celibate, unmarried leader who nonetheless finds great fulfillment in ministering to his bride, his church, I think can be very meaningful for these folks. And I don't want to dismiss that, but again, I don't see what that necessarily has to do with the idea that Jesus at some point may have been married. To me, this is a possibility. That's all it is, and all we have is evidence that other people speculated on that possibility as well. So, there is an alternative and more positive way of thinking about Jesus' celibacy, but I don't necessarily think that people should be threatened by the possibility that Jesus may not have been married.
Yeah, and I would agree on that.
Yeah.
It seems that, recently probably this came into the mainstream and into kind of mainstream ideas with Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
But God knows he wasn't the only one who have had these thoughts and these ideas that was put into the printed media. Years ago, what's the name of the book off the top of my head? Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Was probably one of the first ones that I read that kind of threw that kind of hypothesis out there. And the idea of Christ and Mary Magdalene being married and of a sacred bloodline that is carried down. We can probably go on a gazillion conspiracy theory sites right now and look at various claims of the Illuminati bloodlines and who they are carried through various European bloodlines of Christ, whether they're talking to the Sinclairs or many others, Margovians, and most of that, I kind of just, usually laugh off. But the truth is that there are many people who do believe that these ideas are true ideas, whether they are rooted in any fundamental truth or whether these are kind of just stories. But I, again, would question is that where do these stories stem from? Because many of these seem to kind of predate, kind of the ideas that, we have learned from like recent discoveries, like the Gospel of Jesus' wife. I mean, this is a recent discovery. So where do you think these come from? Do you think these are kind of archetypal ideas that have maybe planted themselves within humanity and now we're just...
Yeah, I would say that, certainly people speculated. This fragment is one example of speculation. I'm not sure that I like Professor King's decision to dub it the Gospel of Jesus' wife. It's, awfully small.
Right.
But I think that there's been this speculation. I think it's normal and human to speculate, and I think that there's been these ideas perhaps have in some cases been developed as literalist conspiracy theories, when in fact they may have been myths that represented, as you point, have their own truth to them. The idea that there are spiritual children that have been born of Christ and his union with the church, or with his secret bride, perhaps, or something along those lines. And I think, okay, well, maybe this is entirely allegorical. And this is supposed to be just a description of the relationship that some people have with Christ that is very, very direct, rather than adoption. These are just some ideas that I'm throwing out.
And I would say I love those ideas because I find it sometimes blows my mind that many in the Gnostic community and the esoteric community are very easy to kind of dismiss, mainstream Christianity, and these people are fundamentalists and take these ideas literally, but yet in something like this, they're no better in being literalist in what the texts are, instead of maybe taking them symbolically or esoterically. And what does this mean if we were to say Christ was married and there was a definitive Gnostic gospel or any gospel that says he was married? As a Gnostic, would we necessarily take that literally? Or would we take it symbolically? Would we find other meaning and interpretation of this? Very interesting, and it's something that we will be continuing tonight on Talk Gnosis After Dark. I think we've got some great questions that we would love to get some response, though, from our audience on this. And I'm going to ask our audience, please respond to us typical means, either in Facebook notes, on YouTube, on the video you're watching now, by dropping us a line at talkgnosis at gnosticnyc.com. But what do you think about all of these questions? What if Jesus was married? Does it matter? And please let us know in the comments. This is something that we will definitely continue, both on the podcast, but I think as the story continues in additional videos and future podcasts as well.
And we also really enjoy seeing your comments on YouTube. We try as we can to answer people's questions and comments, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you very much to those of you who have been commenting. I also want to remind everybody about Patreon. If you'll notice, our shows do not have ads on them. We know they're annoying, but if you are interested in supporting an increase in these podcasts and vlogs and videos that we do, you can help support us through a service called Patreon, which allows you to pledge as little as a few cents for each piece of content that we release at Gnostic NYC releases each month. And you can also set a cap on it too. So if you don't want to, you only have a certain amount that you can afford to pledge. You can set a cap on this as well. You can go to Patreon, patreon.com/Gnostic, and you can pledge a small amount, and we've got some interesting projects coming up that you can help fund, as well as a special premium for those who pledge $2 or more. I will, upon request, do a emailed geomancy reading for you. So if you are interested in supporting us, please do check out our Patreon site. Also, I want to remind everybody about the Johnite Conclave. The Apostolic Johnite Church is one of the largest and most active Gnostic churches, I think, in the world, and they are having their annual conclave in Chicago. I'll be attending. Are you going to be attending, Bishop Ken?
I'm going to try my best.
Okay. And Father Tony, our executive producer, will be there as well. You do not have to be a Johnite to join us, and there's going to be some great speakers, and you can participate in as much or as little as you'd like, but it's a great opportunity to hear some great speakers and to get to know some Gnostics. So if you're interested, visit the Johnite's website at www.johnite.org, and you can get all the information that you need about coming to Conclave.
That's fantastic. Again, I want to just remind our listeners that they can always visit us on Facebook. leave comments for us right here on YouTube. They can visit our website at talkgnosis.gnosticnyc.com. They can also subscribe via RSS feed. Make sure that if you enjoyed tonight's show, that you stay tuned to that to be able to catch our show Talk Gnosis After Dark, which is available both on iTunes and Stickler, and again on the links that we gave before. We're Stitcher. Make sure I get that right. So make sure that you check us out there. We try to continue the discussions that we have every week on this subject, and I think that we get a little bit more in depth, and I think sometimes a lot more entertaining.
A lot more entertaining. A lot more entertaining. Okay, then. Well, this has been a production of the Gnostic NYC Network. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with your friends, click the like button, and subscribe to our channel. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the views of Gnostic NYC or any other organization. No animals were harmed during the production of this show. And for more Talk Gnosis, tune in every Wednesday for new episodes. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.